Hey friends, let's get moving. For today's class, it might be a good idea to have a stiff folded blanket or a yoga block or even the pillows from your couch nearby, just in case. So let's get started. Take your feet wide apart and put your hands on your hips. And we're gonna start out with some rib slides from side to side. So we're not crunching up one side at a time. You're just taking your whole rib cage and laterally shifting it side to side. Notice what that does to your breath. And now let's add some arms. So pause and lift your arms up without doing a back bend or without lifting your ribs. So your arms might not be in line with your ears, and that's okay. So continue with your rib slides. You've got a big beach ball in between your hands. Maybe you notice that you can slide over to one side a little bit further than the other side. I can. And as we go here, it's up to you how quickly or slowly you want to move. It's your call, whatever feels best for your body. Let's bring the hands down to the hips again. Kick the toes out wider than the heels and lower into a wide squat position. So we're gonna kind of keep the same movement, but add to it a little bit. So you're gonna take your left arm and reach it up and to the right diagonally. Now, as you do that, your ribs are gonna shift to the right as well. And then we're gonna switch to the other side. So as the ribs go to the left, the right arm reaches up at a diagonal. And you're gonna go side to side. And again, you can go faster or you can go slower. It's up to you. Keep breathing. Stay low. Can you keep on sinking those hips? I'm still going. We're still going. Hopefully you're feeling warm. Maybe you've started creeping up here. Can you sink back down for 3, 2, and 1. Come to the center, let your legs straighten out, shake out your hips, turn your toes to face forward, and then step your feet back in towards one another. So let's do a little bit of balancing on one foot now that our legs are a little bit warmed. So have your feet hip bone distance apart, and we're gonna shift into the right foot. Now, as we shift over to the right foot, you might notice that your hips want to slide way out to the side, like you're getting a little sassy. So try to keep your right hip over top of your ankle. And that's going to mean that these muscles on the outside of your right hip here are going to have to wake up to stabilize. So you can always connect with that muscle by tapping a little bit on the side of your hip to wake that up. So another way to think of it is, as we shift over to the right foot, move the top of the right pelvis down towards the ground. And that action is going to help to keep the right hip more over the right ankle. Now, it might not be totally 100% drop a plumb line right down there, and that's fine, just as long as these muscles here on the right hip are working the outer right hip. So you can feel that you can relax and let the left foot sink to the ground. And you can also, again, engage, and then the left foot floats up away from the ground. So it's coming from the hip. It's not coming from the left waist. Okay. You can always touch the left waist and feel if those muscles engage when your left foot comes up off the ground. And if they are, then come back and tap on the right hip Wake that muscle up. Say, rise and shine, little buddy. Okay, so you're just letting your left hip lower down and then engaging the right side hip to lift the left leg up. This is a pelvic list. That's what we're calling it. Okay. And now let's go over to the other side. So put your left foot down and shift your weight over to your left foot. And I mean, maybe let's do what we're not supposed to do to kind of over exaggerate. So really let your hips shift this time over to the left. And then see if when you try to pick your right foot up, can you lift the right foot up, but also hug that left hip back in towards the midline of your body. And again, tap those muscles if you feel like they need a wake-up call. This one is my weaker side, I think. And so my right waist tries to hike my hip for me. And that's not what we want to do. So if you need to put your hands there on the right waist and feel, is this what's lifting my right foot up? Or is it this? Remember, we want the side of the left hip to lift the right foot up. So you're just gonna let the right hip fall, which is lengthening the outside of the left hip. And then the top of the left hip, the top of the left side of the pelvis moves down towards the ground. And that engages the outer hip and lifts the right leg up off the ground. So of course, if this is really wobbly for you, you can hold on to a chair or you can be over at the wall for extra support. And ideally, you would want to do this until you feel the muscle starting to fatigue. You want to feel that spot getting really tired. And that's going to help you build strength there. This will translate really great to improving your walking. Ooh, I'm feeling it on this side. Okay, and let's go ahead and stop. We're going to come down to the ground. And if you can sit on your heels, great. If that doesn't feel good for your knees, you can put a block or a cushion or a blanket under your bottom. Also, we're not going to just be staying here. We're going to be going from side to side. So it might be a good idea to put some blankets or pillows on either side of your body, on either side of your hips. You're going to rest your hands lightly on your knees and shift your hips off your heels and over to the left. So if you can get your left seat down to the ground, great. If you can't, you're going to bring the ground up to your hip with a folded blanket or a pillow or a block or whatever. And then exhale to come back to center. And then we go over to the right. So the hips shift off to the right. And if maybe this side is different, maybe you can reach the ground on this side, but you couldn't on the other side. Or maybe you need help on this side with a blanket or a cushion. Support yourself however you need to. Again, always feel free to pause if you need to run and get some supplies and then come back and rejoin. So to come back to center, you're going to exhale. So you feel your trunk muscles bringing your pelvis back and forth. And so you're just going to go from side to side. I always hear myself rolling over the tendons on the fronts of my ankles. So that can be, hopefully that doesn't gross you out. Some people get grossed out. You can always cushion that with a blanket underneath if you want. So as you're going here, you really want to try to keep rib cage and upper body pretty stable. So we're really trying to wake up our waist and give our waist some freedom. And believe it or not, that's really going to help with core strengthening too. So the next time you get over to the left, bloop, hang out there. So you're going to take your right hand to your left knee and lift your left arm up. Now, you might feel like you're at max length right here. That's fine if you are. If you have any extra room to move, maybe you can ever so slightly shift your ribs to the right. And for me, it's kind of a mental shifting. It doesn't really go much further than that. But we do just want to get as much length on this left side as we can without crunching into the right side. Because, I mean, if you want to try that, try crunching into the right side and notice that, at least for my body, I lose core engagement. I have to support my body a lot more when I'm trying to shift the ribs instead of scrunching on the side. So, and I want you to be working on your core strength during this video. So that's why we're just doing this lateral shifting. So go ahead and bring your left hand back down, shift into the center, and then go over to the right side again. And then left hand comes to the right leg, lift your right arm up, and if you can, maybe it's a mental shift, maybe it's like a microscopic millimeter, if that's even a thing. I don't know. Shift it to the left just a bit. So we're not scrunched. We're really supported through the torso. Abdominals are working just naturally. The deep abdominals are just naturally working to hold you up here. You don't have to suck in or brace your tummy or anything like that. They should naturally turn on as you are shifting the ribs. Okay, go ahead and come back to center and then go back to the first side. So left side down, right hand to left thigh, left arm up. Maybe you have room to shift the ribs. And here we're gonna start windmilling the arm. So as you take the arm back behind you, you can imagine that there's maybe some cobwebs back there that you're trying to dust out. Really stretch through the arm. Really innervate your entire arm, even your fingers. And now, as we start to take the arm back behind us, maybe you can open your chest up towards the ceiling any amount. Just shifting the shoulders open any amount. And as the arm comes forward, the shoulder can come forward too. And last one. Great, come back to center. And then right hip down, left hand to the right thigh, right arm up. Maybe there's a little shift of the ribs to the left, a microscopic millimeter, if you will. And then you can start to windmill and maybe notice, are there more cobwebs in this shoulder than the other shoulder? I think maybe there's the same amount of cobwebs in my shoulders. They're just in different places. So really trying to eke out as much range of motion, especially back behind you as you can. And all of it's coming from the shoulder. So there's no back bending or ribs moving to try to get the arm back there. It's just the arm, just the shoulder. And then as you keep going with that, then we can start to add that movement in the shoulders, kind of a little bit of a twist open. And so this left hand is really just there on the thigh for stability. I'm not cranking myself into a twist here. Last one. Great. And come back to center. Let's go ahead and stretch out these legs, shall we? So go ahead and come into all fours. And if you want some padding under your knees, feel free to double up your mat in the middle or put a blanket under there. Now here in all fours, we're gonna play around with stability. So find your neutral spine, neutral rib cage, so no rib cage sagging or tummy sagging. Try to have a nice long line of the spine and the pelvis there. And then keep this all stable. See if you can lift a hand by bending the elbow. Now, if you go to lift one hand, does your table wobble? Try to keep your table in center. And you can switch from side to side. You can do this as slowly or as quickly. You can add in a shoulder tap if you want. And after you've checked in with moving the hands and the arms, let's check in with moving the legs. So can you keep your table stable and stretch your left leg out back behind you? Can you keep your table stable and take your left leg out to the left any amount? Oh, got my blanket there. There it is. And then move your left leg back and bend the knee. So take the right leg back now. And let's imagine that the right foot is at 6 o'clock. Can you take the right foot over to 3 o'clock while keeping a stable table? And then back to 6 o'clock. And then over to the left again. So the left leg comes back to 6 o'clock. And then slide the left leg out to 9 o'clock. Now, I'm going to face you so you can see this. You can keep going with that. If as you take your leg out to 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, maybe you notice that the opposite hip really shifts laterally. So this is kind of the same thing that we did standing up in the balance. We really want to hug that hip in towards the midline so the hip stays over the knee. So I'm kicking all my props back here. So starting out at 6 o'clock and then sliding to 9 o'clock, and feel how your core abdominals are working, feel how your hip muscles are working to keep that hip stable over the knee. Okay, so focus on that as you keep, it's like a timetable. We're in a tabletop position and our legs are telling time. I'm sorry, I won't tell that bad joke again. Okay, one more each way. Great. And then let's curl the toes under. Shift your hips back towards your heels, and you can start walking your hands back towards your knees. Now, if you feel a good stretch in your toes, stay there. If you feel like you might want a little bit more stretch sensation, you can start to sit up a little bit more. And as you're here, make sure your heels are pointing straight up towards the ceiling. You don't want your heels flopped out to the sides. Now, wherever you are, whether you're upright or you're down with your hands on the ground, and of course, if you start to feel a little tired in your feet or like the stretch starts to become too intense, back up a little bit. Put your hands down, walk your hands forward. I'm going to go ahead and put my hands down for this next part. So I want you to push all 10 of your toes into the ground. So it would be like if you allowed yourself to move, that action of the toes pushing down could potentially move your body forward. And of course, I said push all 10 toes into the ground, but your pinky toe might not touch the ground. So just whatever toes are touching the ground, do what you can, push those down into the ground. So we're isometrically, it's isometric toe strengthening. Notice if it's easier for you to push through the toes on one foot than on the other foot. Maybe it's easier to push through the big toe than the littler toes. Just see if you can observe. Okay. So now go ahead and lift up off of your heels, and you can uncurl your toes. I'm going to go ahead and put my blanket under my knees for extra padding. So we're going to be in a low lunge situation here. So you want to start, I'm going to face you so you can see your knees under your hip bones. Don't be too wide, don't be too narrow. Knees under your hip bones and a neutral pelvis. So that means that you have your hip bone, your ASIS, anterior superior iliac spine. That's what that bony part of your pelvis is called. You want that to be vertical over your pubic bone. So if your pubic bone is forward of your ASIS, it would look like this. Okay, we kind of think of that as my tailbone is tucked under. Okay, if your pubic bone is behind your ASIS, it might look like this, like sticking your tail feathers out. Okay, so those were really big exaggerations. So you want to try to find neutral, which would be ASIS stacked over your pubic bone. And you want to keep that pelvic alignment as you start to take the right leg forward. Now, notice that I'm keeping my knee back behind my ankle so that I have room to lunge forward. So we're going to keep the pelvis in that same neutral position. And I like to have my hands on my hips so that I can check in with that. Start to lunge forward, taking your pelvis forward as you go. And you'll probably reach a point where you're like, oh wow, there's some stretch happening in the front of the left hip, the front of the left thigh, or maybe you move so far that you feel like you can't keep that neutral pelvis, that maybe it starts to tuck under. So go as far as you can go with the neutral pelvis. And then we're gonna add a little swivel twist. So put one hand at your upper belly, just below your ribs, and the other hand at your chest, the center of your chest. And you're gonna swivel into a little twist. So I'd like to think of this as like a pepper grinder motion. You just have the top part moving. The twist is just coming from your tummy muscles and your spinal muscles. Your torso is just swiveling back and forth. And swivel towards the right. And notice how that changes the stretch sensation in the front of your left hip. And then swivel back towards the left. And notice how that changes the stretch sensation. So maybe as you're going here and feeling into that stretch sensation, you can kind of get a sense for what parts tug on other parts. Great. Come back to the center. Let's bring the right knee back under the right hip. So shift your pelvis back and step back. Take a deep breath in and out. That felt good. I hope it felt good for you too. So now take your left foot and step it forward with a neutral pelvis, ASIS stacked over the pubic bone. And again, give yourself space to lunge forward. So start with your knee back behind your ankle. Now, keep your pelvis in neutral and shift it forward. So you're coming into this lunge. And it's interesting to note, oh, can I lunge as far on this side as I did on the other side? What feels different? What feels the same? Keeping the pelvis in neutral. So you don't want to go so far that your pelvis starts to tuck under. I don't know if you could see that. I'm going to show you what not to do. If I lunge too far, my pelvis, my right hip starts to open up behind me. Things get a little wonky. So for the purposes of this today, I'd like for you to just lunge as far as you can go with a neutral pelvis and really concentrating the load of this move right here on the front of the right hip, hopefully. Let's go ahead and swivel twist. So if you remember which hand was on top the last time, maybe you switch it. It doesn't really matter. You can go ahead and swivel twist. So interesting thing, every body is different. Every body is gonna experience a movement in a different way. So on this side, for me, this position is all about stability for my front leg. My left leg is shaking right now. I'm not feeling a stretch in my right leg at all. But it's a totally different experience on the other side. So notice what experience you're having and welcome it. And let's swivel towards the left. And feeling down into that stretch sensation. How has it changed as we go to the left? And then to the right, how has it changed? And come back to center. Back your pelvis up. And bring your left knee under your left hip. Whew. Like I said, that's hard for me on that side. Okay, curl your toes under again. Put your hands back down on the ground. Shift your weight back towards your heels so we're getting that stretch in the toes again. Maybe you're sitting up a little bit more, whatever's working for you. And go ahead and press your toes into the mat again. And relax. Okay, so I'm gonna shift my hips back up so I can turn to face you. And you might wanna face sideways too, so that you can keep your hands and arms inside the vehicle at all times. So starting with knees under hip bones, not hip flesh, you're gonna take your left leg out to the left and put the sole of the foot on the ground. So my right knee is in a line with my left arch. And we're going to take the arms out wide. And here with your wrists at shoulder height, bend at the wrists so your palms face away from your ears and kind of reach through your straight elbows. Maybe feel a little nerve stretch. See if you can spread your fingers wide. And then let's go ahead and I'm a little teapot, tip me over to the right. So put your right hand down on the ground, sweep your left arm over your head and enjoy a stretch here. And you can explore, do a little exploring here. What happens? How does the stretch sensation change? How does it feel when you take your left shoulder and move it forward and down? And how does the stretch sensation change? How does it feel if you take your left shoulder back up towards the ceiling? Kind of toggling back and forth. And then look down at your right hand and bring your left hand to your left hip. So get really strong through your right hand, and we're going to float the left leg up off the ground. Now, you want to make sure that your left leg isn't out in front of your body, not too far out and back either. Ankle in a line with hip. And then you're just going to do little pulses up and down. So we're saying hello to that side hip, side butt again. Just little pulses, a few inches up and down each time. Now, ideally, you would go until you feel fatigue there. And if you want to press pause and go until you feel fatigue, do it. If you don't want to, tuck this away into your head and maybe you can find time for this even when you're not working out. Okay, go ahead and put your left foot down on the ground. Take a breath in. Come back up, right? And let's take the left knee underneath the left hip and we're going to go to the other side now. Take the right foot out to the right. I need to scooch so that I can keep my foot on the mat. Now notice if you take your foot too far, your knee is going to be way outside of your hip. So don't go too far. Okay, left knee is in line with the arch of the right foot. Now take your arms out again, wrists at shoulder height. Maybe get a brief nerve stretch again by bending the wrists and pointing the palms outward, extending out through straight elbows. And I'm a little teapot. Bring your left hand down to the ground. Sweep your right arm over your head. Enjoy breathing here. And explore a little. How does it feel if I bring my right shoulder forward and down? How does it feel when I bring my right shoulder back and up, opening the chest? Now, look down at your left hand. Bring your right hand to your hip. And you're going to float your right leg, right foot up off the ground. And it's important to have your ankle in a line with your hip here, because if your leg is forward of your body, then the side hip isn't really going to be working as much. It'll end up being more the front of the thigh. And if your leg is behind your body, it'll be more hamstring and buttocks. Back buttocks. And we really want side butt, side hip. So ankle in a line with hip, looking down for balance, and pulse that leg up and down, just a few inches up and down. Now remember, ideally you go until fatigue. There's not really a way I can control for that here, other than to say, hopefully you could just press pause. That was me pressing a space bar, but maybe you're using a remote or something. Maybe you can pause and keep going, or pause and stop, or maybe you're like, Jen, I'm fast forwarding. I guess that's okay. For 3, 2, and 1. Put that right foot down. Take a deep breath in as you exhale. Come on up. Let's sit down. So get your blanket out of the way. Take your feet wide apart. Now, if it's hard to sit upright here, if you feel kind of slumped, bring your hands behind your back. Okay, and let's try to rock the pelvis forward and lengthen the spine. So you might be working here. If you feel like it's easy to sit up straight, great, sit up straight. If you feel like it's really easy to sit up straight, then maybe you can lean forward a little bit. Going to a place where maybe you feel some sensation in the legs, some stretch sensation. And then you can, if you were forward, come back up, bring your hands behind your back, and let's scoot the legs in. And then bring the soles of the feet together and the knees apart. So if you can comfortably sit upright without feeling super slumped, great. If not, put your hands behind your back to support you. And here you're going to try rocking your pelvis forward and backward, forward and backward. So we're taking our pelvis out of neutral, in and out of neutral, forward and back. For 3, 2, and 1. Okay, to finish up, let's come down to the back and stretch out our hips. Now, when you get down to your back, you might consider putting a blanket or a pillow under your head, especially if you would say, I have tight hips. So if you think you have tight hips especially, go ahead and put that pillow under your head or that blanket under your head. Move your microphone. And so have your knees bent. Cross your left ankle over your right thigh. If you feel a good stretch in your left hip, stay there. If not, float your right foot up off the ground. Sometimes I like to do it with no hands. You can always put your hands on your right knee, or you can reach through and interlace your fingers behind your thigh or on top of your shin. You do you. And just like we explored a little bit earlier, you can do some exploring here. You can rock your hips and your legs from side to side, watching how the stretch sensation changes. Enjoying your breath. Let's go ahead and switch. So put your right foot down and your left foot down. Take a big breath in and out. And then let's cross right ankle over left thigh. Now check in. Is this a good stretch? If it is, hang out here. If you want more stretch sensation, float your left foot up off the ground. You can do no hands, or you can put your hands on your left knee, interlace behind the left thigh, or on top of the left shin. There's so many options. If you feel like you still really can't reach your leg, you might need to put a higher pillow underneath your head, and that might help you, especially if you feel like laying down is kind of crunching your neck. And again, explore a little bit, shifting the legs and hips, rocking a little from side to side. And then go ahead and release your left foot down to the ground and your right foot down to the ground. Take a full breath in and out. And then bring the soles of your feet together and your knees apart. Instead of imagining or hoping, willing or wishing for your knees to get closer to the ground, I offer this image as an alternative. So imagine that there's a vector running from your inner thigh all the way up at your groin, and that vector is running out along the inner thigh to the knees. So imagine, instead of the knees getting closer to the ground, imagine that line getting longer, that inner thigh line getting longer, and that vector extending out from the knees, from the inner thigh all the way up at the groin, out through the knees infinitely. This is a perfect time to thank your body, to extend kindness and compassion to your body. Maybe think, if a friend that you knew, a dear friend or a family member, did this video, would you say, "Good job, proud of you for being healthy, taking care of yourself"? You probably would. Think about what you might say to a loved one and say that to yourself. If you would like to relax a little bit more, we're going to finish up here. So you can set a timer and extend your legs and relax or meditate or whatever feels good to you. If you're ready to get up and get going, take your hands under your legs and bring your legs back towards one another. Put the soles of the feet on the ground. Maybe you'd like to give your knees a little hug and rock a little bit from side to side, whatever feels nice. And then you can slowly roll over to one side and sit up. Thanks so much for joining me. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you next time.